This is the follow-up to my folding knife tutorial video. Today I'll use the pattern and make a lockback folder. We start out with some steel. I recommend precision ground. It's flat, and especially if you're starting out, it makes life a lot easier. O1 works easily and is forgiving in heat treating. It's fairly inexpensive. MSC Direct has a 36-inch 1-inch thick by 1-inch wide piece for $30. That's enough for about 4 or 5 knives. I make 6 copies of the original drawing, and these will be cut out and glued to the metal. Use 3M number 77 glue. This works great, and the templates don't even peel off in water. Here the cutout templates are put on the nickel silver. This is what I use. You can use steel, titanium, whatever you'd like. The parts are rough cut. Leave extra metal. Try not to cut it to the finished size. There'll be plenty of time later to do that. I start out with the blade. I grind that close to shape, but certainly not to the line. I use this blade guide here, file my notch, and finish it with sandpaper up to 320 grit. Here it is. I drill the pivot hole with a 1/16 inch bit. Here I'll redraw the arc just in case the pivot hole is off. This is your last chance to get it right. But again, don't grind this all the way to the line. Keep it proud. Center punch the liners right at the pivot point mark. Again, drill these with a 1/16 inch bit. I use bent 1/16 inch welding wire to hold things in place as I'm roughing them to shape. I use carpet tape now along with the pins. This works great. I used to use super glue, but I find that it's a real pain to remove. But you can use it. It does certainly work well. Just have to make sure you keep the blades cool, otherwise the super glue will melt and they'll come apart. With the liners together, they're rough shaped. The good part about putting the pivot in is that whatever happens to one shape when you sand it is repeated in the next one. Again, keep these a little bit long just to make sure that there's room later on. You can always take away metal, but you can't add it easily. Here I'm testing the knife. Just curious to see if things look pretty good. At this point, they look good. So I'll now work on the lock bar. The lock bar is cut out bigger than the pattern that we see here, just to leave room for correction later on. This has to be a super perfect tight fit. I make mine to the point that I actually have to tap the lock bar into place so it holds in the knife. I can really just lift it up and it won't fall out. The reason for that is the lock bar is going to need some sanding, and that little bit of sanding to smooth it out to 320 or 400 is going to make it loose. So it's best to have it tight as I can. The pivot point is placed in the lock bar. That's about 40% of the length of the lock bar. And now we position a spring. I made my spring from a piece of 5160 that I had. Any type of spring steel. I rough shaped it to size, heated it up with a propane torch till it was cherry red, non-magnetic, quenched it in oil, and then tempered it in an oven. Works fine. Here's a knife after the pattern's taken off. Note this is the first time the pattern was removed. Up to this point, everything is done while the pattern is still affixed to the blade. Here, the lock bar needs some tuning up. It's sticking, but sanding it now works and clicks and closes quite well. The bolsters can be applied in many ways. A lot of times I use silver solder to put them in place, but also works well. I have two 16th-inch pinholes that go about halfway into the bolster. I epoxy the bolsters and put the pins in there and sand them off flush, and they're almost indestructible. I've actually tested this out and essentially destroyed the knife trying to get the bolsters off. Now we move on to the handle material. This has to be flat, the part that goes against the knife liners, and also the part that goes against the bolsters has to be square. The outside shapes really don't matter since you're going to sand most of that off anyway. Again, I use carpet tape to rough shape them. Then if everything's coming along well, I'll drill my pinholes in these. I drill from the liner through to the wood. Here the parts have been preliminary shaped and put into a rough place, again fitting the pattern. In this next clip, I've put the pins in place and pinned the pins. These are just brass rod and some mild shaping. There's still a lot of work to do to finish the knife, but it's together now. It works quite well. It opens, closes, and cuts. So this shows that the pattern can work. It's work with all different shapes, sizes of knives. All my folders are made in this fashion, no matter how complex they are. Next, we have gun barrel Damascus for knife and rings. This is rather fascinating. Hope to see you there.